It's my nerd world, and welcome to it, Depeche Mode, the podcast. I'm your host, Jon Justice, and I'm really excited to be back doing the show, and there is so much to talk about. So on the show this week, a brief explanation as to why the show has taken or had taken such a long hiatus. We'll certainly be getting into Depeche Mode being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame come this May. We'll talk a bit about the fandom and why it really was the fandom and a unique set of circumstances, I'll explain, that inspired me to come back and do the Depeche Mode show again. I'll give you my brief review of Spirits in the Forest, the Depeche Mode concert and fan film that came out back in November, and then we're going to get into your listener feedback. I've actually been holding on to several emails from the last episode in October of last year, and I got a brand new one as well. So glad you're with the show again this week, and let's get right to it.
My Nerd World.
It is Depeche Mode, the podcast, here on My Nerd World, and I am your host, Jon Justice. Really glad you're with the show again this week. And what I'm hoping is going to happen is that I really do hope that the show is going to be back on a weekly basis. I'll get into a little bit of that in just a moment. If you want to email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Talkshownerd@gmail.com. If you are listening, watching this on YouTube, you can always leave a comment on YouTube as well. But I want the fandom to be a big part of this show. And that means that I want to hear from you. So again, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment if you're up on YouTube. If you want to support this show, I'll give you details about how you can do that towards the end of this week's Depeche Mode show. So, first off, my name is Jon Justice, for those that haven't met me before. If you are brand new to the show, I want to encourage you to go back and listen to the previous episodes, especially the very first few episodes, where I really get into, in great detail, my fandom of the band, going all the way back to 1985 and the first time that I ended up hearing Shake the Disease. Although I'm really curious to go back and listen to some of those early episodes, because I'm curious if that's what I landed on in those first episodes. But that certainly is what is sort of stuck in my memory right now as my first real introduction into Depeche Mode, was hearing Shake the Disease back in 1985 on K-Rock Radio in Los Angeles, where I was born and raised and where I grew up. The reason the show took a bit of a hiatus, and my plans moving forward to hopefully do the show on a weekly, if not bi-weekly basis, depending. The reason the show took a hiatus is because, for those that aren't familiar with me, I am a full-time radio talk show host. I am part of the Justice and Drew show on Twin Cities News Talk here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I also host a weekly Star Wars podcast. And I really enjoy doing the Depeche Mode show, but in terms of making sure that I had my own free time and the time that I spent with my family — I've been married for 20 years. I have a 13-year-old son and a 17-year-old son. I had to pare down what it was that I was doing beyond my full-time job. And my focus was really on my full-time job and producing the Star Wars podcast that I do every single week. Something changed recently, though. Part of it was Depeche Mode and their nomination, and then the decision to induct them into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame coming up in May, which they're going to be performing live, which I cannot wait to see. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But really, the inspiration to come back and do the show happened about 2 weeks ago. I received a direct message from Columbia Records, and they asked me if I would share what Depeche Mode means to me. I was thrilled at the opportunity. I assumed that Columbia Records had, been on Twitter, saw my Twitter profile, saw that I was a Depeche Mode fan, and that I recorded podcasts, and decided to reach out and ask me if I could record a video saying what Depeche Mode means to me. So it was a bit difficult to kind of work the whole thing out, because I recorded one 6-minute video here at home, but it was too long to go and share it with the record label through Twitter. So it took a few days for me to finally get the video that I shot downloaded. They didn't really give me any details as to what they were going to be doing with the video. So I shared the video with them, and a few days later, I got another message from Columbia Records on Twitter saying, "Hey, Depeche Mode is going to share your video," and I really couldn't believe it. Look, I've been a talk show host and been doing radio now for 24, 25 years, and I've had a lot of cool things happen within my personal career, right? Just being a talk show host and working in different cities. I was in Tucson, Arizona for 9 years, and that's a relatively small city, and a lot of people knew me there. I'd go out. I was kind of a quasi-local celebrity. I don't gravitate towards that kind of thing, but I did have a level of notoriety within the community, and I do here in Minneapolis as well, but to a much lesser extent. That being said, to have Depeche Mode come and reach out to me after all these years of fandom to ask me to share my feelings about the band, I was like, that is the coolest thing. How great is that? I've been really blessed to have met the band on a couple of different occasions, not lengthy and not in an interview situation, which I would love to do at some point in time, but through meet and greets and stories that I've told on previous podcasts. Definitely go in and check out some of those earlier shows where I talk about back during the World Violation Tour, being out in Los Angeles with my buddies, going out clubbing, doing nothing with my fingers, and actually running into the band at a club in the middle of when they were doing their Dodger Stadium shows, which I attended as well. For the record, I've seen the band 34 times, and again, I chronicle all that on previous episodes. So I wasn't 100% sure what they were going to be doing with my video. I went to the Facebook page, and I saw that one of the individuals who was chronicled in Spirits in the Forest had a short video on the Depeche Mode Facebook page, basically saying the same thing of what I'm saying now. Telling what Depeche Mode means to them. And then I noticed that the Twitter feed had been asking individuals to share what Depeche Mode means to them. And they were, hey, tag Depeche Mode on Twitter and share a video with us. And I saw that they had shared another video from another woman who was also in the Spirits in the Forest movie. So, gave them the video. I was waiting, and they said it would be out this week. And sure enough, about 2 nights ago, it was Wednesday night, I'm getting ready to go to bed. I go to bed super early. Always listen to Depeche Mode as I go to sleep. I usually put together like 5 songs. It's been a habit of mine for years. I put together 5 songs on my iPad. It's next to my bed. And those songs usually kind of taper me off to sleep because I go to bed so early. Going to bed at 6:30, usually asleep by 7:30, and then I'm up at 2:30 in the morning to get ready for my show, which starts at 6 a.m. And there's always a Depeche Mode song on that playlist. As of late, for the past year, the last song that I hear before going to bed is Cover Me from Spirit. So I'm just getting ready to go to sleep. And I happen to do one quick glance at my phone, and I see that Depeche Mode has tweeted out my video. It was a shorter version of the video. They basically pared it down to about a minute. And it's funny, right now as I'm doing the show, I went and looked, and I'm still the top video. I'm still the last tweet that they put out from last week, and you can hear it in my voice, right? I can't hide it. I've got a grin from ear to ear, going to Depeche Mode's official Twitter page and seeing my raggedy-haired, goofy. I shot that video in the studio where I do my radio show at about 4:30 in the morning, and it shows in the video. So they put the video out. And then suddenly I'm getting all of these follows and likes and retweets, and it was just the coolest thing ever. It really was. And look, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that big of a deal, right? Okay. Depeche Mode shared a 1-minute video of me talking about how much I love the band, right? I mean, again, relatively speaking. But as really a lifelong Depeche Mode fan, it was just the coolest thing ever. I'm still just completely tickled by the whole thing. I don't, boy, that dated me, huh? I'm totally tickled. No, I'm taken aback by it. It's so cool. That this band that I have followed for all these years and they've had such a massive influence on me, like they have you, right? And this is what I want to get into in just a moment, because it's just that reaction that fans have. It's one of my coolest Depeche Mode stories that I never thought I would have a new one like that, right? I mean, I'm older now. I'm 47 years old. Like I said, I'm married. I have a family. I still love the band. When I was younger, my ability to go to 34 Depeche Mode shows, as you know, they don't tour all that often. It meant going to like every single available show when they came out to California, both Northern California and Southern California. I did all the nights at the Forum. Went to the Rose Bowl 101 show on the World Violation Tour. I saw pretty much every show in California on that tour. Traveled across into Arizona to see them. But over the years, as they've continued to tour, I've been sort of limited to only being able to go to one show per tour, which is great. Don't misunderstand. But, as we get older in life, the opportunities to have sort of new and meaningful Depeche Mode experiences, they diminish as the band gets older and take a little bit more time putting out records, and I don't have the opportunity to see them more than I would like. And as a matter of fact, if you listen to some previous episodes, you'll hear me talk about the fact that I almost didn't get out to see the Spirit Tour because they didn't come to Minneapolis. I didn't have the opportunity to travel anywhere else at the time to go see them. And thankfully, they extended the tour and came to Chicago. And so I made the trek down to Chicago and spent the night down there to go see the show by myself. And it was absolutely amazing. It was one of the best shows that I had seen of them in, a decade, if not more. It was an incredible show. I saw them on the Delta Machine tour. I saw them I was in Arizona at the time. I saw them on that tour. I mean, I've seen all the tours since the Music for the Masses tour and the 101 show. I saw 2 shows during that tour. I saw one at the Great Western Forum, and then I saw that final show at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. And I've seen every tour since then. And while I enjoyed the Delta Machine tour, and I enjoyed the Playing the Angel tour and the Sounds of the Universe tour, there was something about the Spirit tour that was magical in a way that reminded me of seeing them on specifically the World Violation and Songs of Faith and Devotion tour. So the video comes out, and I've had many individuals, again, retweeting and commenting to me on Twitter, received some emails that I'll share with you coming up, and something really interesting happened. And that is, I saw a stark contrast between the fandom of this band that I love so much, that you love so much, and other fandoms. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I want to drive home this point and why this was the motivation for me returning to do the show, and what is motivating me to want to do the show on a weekly basis. One, I do want to complete the project that I started before, and that is running through every single Depeche Mode album. I think I landed on Ultra, if I'm not mistaken. And next week, my plan is to pick up where I left up on Ultra and continue doing album reviews. I really wanted this show to kind of be a reintroduction to my nerd world and Depeche Mode, the podcast. I'm a massive Star Wars fan. So the things that I love in life, but when you kind of tick down the list of important things in my life, God, family, my wife and my children, my job, and then the ancillary things that give me and fill me with joy in life. There's 3 things. It's oddly NASCAR. I love NASCAR. I'm a big NASCAR fan. I'm a massive Star Wars fan, which is why I do a weekly Star Wars podcast, and part of what I'm going to get into in this conversation. And then I'm, of course, a massive Depeche Mode fan. Those three things provide me a ton of joy. Star Wars and Depeche Mode have a special place in my heart because I was a fan of both of those things before I was a fan of anything else of those things. I saw Star Wars: A New Hope when I was 5 years old in the theater in Rosemead, California, and I instantly became a fan like so many other individuals, so many other children at that point in time. And I've been a fan ever since. I was a fan of Star Wars before I was a fan of anything. I liked music. I listened to music, but there wasn't any band that I gravitated towards, right? I just listened to the radio. I mean, I think the first cassette I ever bought was the Go-Go's Talk Show, I think is what it was. But the first time that I ended up hearing Depeche Mode, it spoke to me. The song spoke to me. And they've been a part of my life and speaking to me and helping me through the good times and the bad times ever since then. And from that day forward, I was a massive Depeche Mode fan. And as I said in the video, I consumed as much Depeche Mode as I could. And you know what that's like. This is what I'm driving at. You know what that feeling is, where you just, I want to hear every single thing that this band has done. And the lyrics are so meaningful. And the music that they craft is so meaningful. And the band themselves is meaningful. You know, they're inspirational. What Dave Gahan has gone through in his life and to still be out there making music, it doesn't get much more inspirational than that. When you look back at the band and the turmoil that they went through and the alcohol consumption and the depression that they went through and Alan Wilder leaving the band and, of course, Dave Gahan and his heroin addiction. How many stories do you hear about rock artists, musicians who are addicted to heroin and then end up getting clean and then continue forward with a career? It's few and far between. I'll never forget that time when we almost lost Dave Gahan and driving through and hearing the report on K-Rock radio. And again, these are all things that I've talked about before. So they share this video, and then I hear from you. And then I see the fans online. And then I see the retweets and the comments. And there's something special about Depeche Mode fans that doesn't really exist anywhere right now in pop culture. We perceive that we're very divided. And I do believe it's mostly perception. Social media, and I talk a lot about this on my Star Wars podcast. My Star Wars podcast, by the way, is called Positively Star Wars. And I changed the name because I take a very positive viewpoint towards Star Wars. My view towards Star Wars movies and content is very much in the same vein of my view and my appreciation of Depeche Mode. I love Depeche Mode. I may not like every single song they put out, but I'm not going to disparage those songs that I don't particularly care for. Because of social media, Twitter and YouTube specifically, you can do politics, right? And we'll talk a bit about that. I mean, certainly the band got political during with the Spirit album. It was a return to the Construction Time Again days, and I talked about that in my commentaries around the release of that album. So I don't mind talking a little bit of politics on the show, but I don't want to make it a focal point because politics are divisive, right? You know, and I don't align with a lot of what Depeche Mode politics are, and I don't care because the genius behind the music, both Martin Gore and Dave Gahan now, is the fact that there is an ambiguity to the music that even though I know what their political leanings are, those songs can take shape for the individual on so many different levels that even if you're not aligning in terms of, say, ideologies, it doesn't matter because the music still speaks to you however the music wants to speak to you. Martin Gore, I'll never forget the first time I heard him asked by an interviewer what a particular song meant, and Martin was like, I'm not going to tell you. I'm paraphrasing. He's like, I'm not going to tell you. I think that the listener needs to discover that on their own. I mean, that's the genius of the music. But doing my Star Wars podcast, I can tell you, man, it's divisive. If you're a Star Wars fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you're not, I'll just tell you that there's so much animosity out there and so many individuals that want to take advantage of the negativity for more views and more clicks on their podcast. It's obnoxious. If you don't like a particular Star Wars movie, that's cool, man. But don't give me a hard time if I do. And that's what happens. But guess what? I suddenly realized through that, and I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. But I suddenly realized that those divisions don't exist inside Depeche Mode, and they never have. And that got me really excited all of a sudden. That there was still a huge group of hardcore fans out there of something, in this case it's Depeche Mode, that aren't divisive. I mean, and it's clear in some of the listener feedback that I'm gonna share with you this week, in some comments that are being made, because we all have different favorite Depeche Mode songs, and we all have albums that we like more than other ones. But I've never heard a Depeche Mode fan disparaging another Depeche Mode fan for example, in one of these emails, one of the individuals that reached out to me said that they disagreed with me with regard to Delta Machine because they felt that it was the best release after Songs of Faith and Devotion. And I think I'd probably mentioned in talking about that particular, or actually I haven't gotten to that album yet, but I know in times past talking about it that of some of the more recent releases, that song has the least amount of songs that I really, really enjoy. But that's okay. And that's cool that we think differently. But you know what I'm talking about, right? And this is that proverbial I'm preaching to the choir. But it got me really excited to come and sit down and spend 20 to 45 minutes to an hour just talking about this band and what's going on with this band again. Because I realized that there was still a fan base out there that hadn't turned on themselves. And I think that's awesome. Going and seeing Depeche Mode in Chicago on the Spirit Tour, it was a really, really eye-opening experience. And it wasn't all that far removed, right, from the previous Delta Machine tour. It had only been about 4 or 5 years or whatever. But there was something just about that particular show in Chicago that really stuck out when I was looking around at the crowd that was there. And I could see there were faces that looked as old as mine, filled with younger people and individuals that had brought their kids, right? And they're just, as well as I do, they're amazing, uplifting experiences. And it was just so great to hear from so many individuals and to be reminded of that part of the fandom, and that we still have something in pop culture that has a huge fan base that aren't at each other's throats and just want to celebrate Depeche Mode together. And I think that's awesome. And I think it's a powerful tribute to the band. And it really does say a lot to the music that they create and the following that they have made throughout these years, where we all kind of feel like a bit of a family. It still feels like a club, just like it did when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, when I was a young adult, where you're a Depeche Mode fan, I'm a Depeche Mode fan too. It still feels that way. And that's amazing to me. So I'm excited. I'm really excited to get back and to do the show again and to complete the project that I started before of spending a podcast on every single album, which I'm going to continue to do. And hopefully it times out right with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I am praying that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame will be a shot of enthusiasm and energy to the band to go and make some more music. I know that as of late, Dave Gahan had said it was still a question mark of when they would start recording again, and I haven't seen any changes in that. That's kind of been the modus operandi of the band for all these years, that they finally say, hey, I've written some songs, and then they get together. They don't really plan things out, and I dig that. I dig that too, because I'm a writer, and I'll get into this coming up. I've written, if you're into sci-fi books, science fiction books. If you like Star Wars, if you're into science fiction, I'm writing a series of books. 2 of the books are out. The third one's going to be out in a couple of months. The books are called Embark. It's Embark is book 1, and then Embark, Treasure in Darkness, book 2, and then the final book in the opening trilogy, because I have more books planned. Embark, The Vanishing War, book 3, will be out again in a couple of months. But I injected Depeche Mode into these books. The main character, Taft, is modeled a little bit on the voice you're hearing right now, but it's modeled absolutely on the voice you're hearing right now from the standpoint of, even though the stories are set in the future, I still included Depeche Mode in this, and I found a mechanism to include the band and to make the core character of Taft, the protagonist, a massive Depeche Mode fan. And I have put Easter eggs in all of the books, so I hope you'll go and check that out, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the show, because that's how you can go in and support the show. So if you retweeted or liked that tweet or commented at me, I just want to say thank you, because you really did inspire me to want to sit back down and take the time out to record this, because it's just great, and such a nice change of pace to be able to talk to a fandom and know that you guys love the band as much as I do. We may not all love the same songs, but I've never seen Depeche Mode fans ever go after each other. Ever. And I can't say that about any other fandom. I can't say that about my beloved Star Wars fandom. I can't say that about my NASCAR fandom, especially when Dale Jr. was still racing. He was my number 1 driver. I don't know. Maybe it's something that's more exclusive when it comes to bands. But my singular focus, as terms of my favorite band, has always been Depeche Mode. So, I mean, I have other bands that I love, but I just don't follow them like I do Depeche Mode. And I can't imagine that I ever will. So, again, that's my long 26-minute intro as to why I'm returning to do the show again. Let's switch gears. I want to talk a little bit about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So that's pretty rad, right? I mean, that's pretty rad. For us fans, for you and for me, to have this band end up in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it feels like total justification, vindication for a band that I know a lot of us felt like deserved a lot more recognition. And I'm so happy for them. I really, really am. And to be inducted with 9 Inch Nails, who I'm also a big fan with. I just think that's absolutely fantastic. And it makes sense, too. You know, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's not exclusive to the U.S., obviously, but, you know, Depeche Mode has always been huge in the United States. And the band has talked about before how, you know, they've always been perceived a certain way in Europe, which I always thought was odd. And Depeche in the United States, you know, they always knew they had a massive fan base here. So I just think that the acknowledgement of this band and how influential they have been could not be any more deserving, and I am so happy for them. I had a former program director of mine, I posted on my Facebook page. If you want to follow me, by the way, I've got a couple of different Twitter accounts. At Jon, Jon Justice, that's my main account, Jon Justice. I use that, for the most part, for my radio show. You know, in sort of everyday tweeting, I probably use that the most often. But I also have at The My Nerd World, and at The My Nerd World is exclusively just for Star Wars, for NASCAR, and for Depeche Mode tweeting. That's all that one's for. I don't do politics or any of that stuff on that particular Twitter feed. So you can find me there, and you can also find me on Instagram at the Jon Justice, and on Twitter if you look for Jon Jon Justice as well. But I had a former program director of mine when I posted they were being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and this guy's always been kind of a pain in the ass. I'm not going to lie. He was one of the first radio stations that I ever worked for, and he was, if you work in radio, you know what I'm talking about. He was that typical program director, a hard-ass program director, okay? I owe him a lot because he did give me some amazing opportunities, but he was difficult to work for, and I think he would even go and admit that. But in typical fashion for this individual, I posted the link for Depeche Mode being into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he kind of pushed back on it, because he's not a true Depeche Mode fan. And he said, what, Depeche Mode gets in there before Kraftwerk does? I understand his point, but he's not right. So obviously Kraftwerk was influential in a big, big way on Depeche Mode when they started, right? That was one of those bands that they kind of modeled themselves after. And Kraftwerk is certainly a very important part of the history of electronic music, especially back during that time of the early 80s. But there's no doubt that Depeche Mode has transcended that. There's no doubt that Depeche Mode has taken what Kraftwerk did in a small way and then exponentially expanded upon it, released all these albums, toured all these years, built up this massive following and fan base, and then subsequently became more influential than Kraftwerk ever was. Right? It's not to say that maybe Kraftwerk gets inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but I just wanted to, and again, that's kind of the difference, right? That's the kind of stuff that you don't see or hear within the Depeche Mode fandom. At least I don't. And if you do, I don't want to see it. I spend a lot of time on the Halo forum. I don't post as much as I used to, but on the Halo forum, I spend a lot of time on there, and look, even with Spirits in the Forest, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, I know that there were some individuals that it was a bit of a divisive release, and I agree with some of those assessments. But I never saw anybody going and giving anybody a hard time about it, and I just think that that's absolutely, I think that's awesome. And again, going back to the whole reason why I'm starting the podcast up again. Really curious to see what the band ends up performing at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's obviously, I don't know how many songs. I was looking and there's no sort of details on that as of yet when the event takes place in May. Considering the fact that they don't have any new material right now and it is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I imagine that, and I'm praying they put together something rather unique, chronicling the history of the band and probably some of their more well-known tracks to the general audience. But I know that I know you are, and I am. I'm just so excited and happy for these guys. They're like friends, right? That's what it feels like. They're like friends, and so I'm proud of them as friends. Because that's what the music does. I mean, that's why we love this band, right? It's that connectivity that they have. I just the music combined with those lyrics. I was listening the other day. I had I have an iPod that's attached sort of permanently inside of my car, and Cause and Effect came up. Okay, and for those that aren't familiar with Cause and Effect are a band, I believe. Unfortunately, I think one of the members of Cause and Effect ended up committing suicide a number of years ago. It's just very sad. But Cause and Effect was one of those bands that sounded a lot like Depeche Mode at the time, especially during the time around Violator. I enjoyed their music quite a bit, just electronic-based pop, which had with emotional lyrics attached to it. And You Think You Know Her popped up on my iPod, and I was listening to Cause and Effect, and it put a smile on my face, because I know that those guys were big Depeche Mode fans, at the time, and the band had really influenced them. But obviously, it goes well beyond, beyond that band. All right, I went off on a tangent. I just wanted to say how excited I am for the band, and thrilled that they're getting this award, this nomination being put into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I'll say it again, it just feels like such a vindication for so many of us, and especially for the people around you that don't understand the fandom, right? Because we all have those friends. We all have those friends that don't quite understand why you love this band as much as you do, right? And so to see them end up in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's like, see, as a matter of fact, quick story, and then we'll move on. I want to talk a little bit about Spirits in the Forest. But here's a great case in point. And I think I told this story on a previous episode, but since it's been a while, I'll share it again. We went to Norway a few years ago for it was the National Guard. They do a cross promotion. So the Norgard, which is the Norway version of the United States National Guard, they send a bunch of their Norgard troops to the U.S., and then the U.S. sends their National Guard troops to Norway. And sometimes, actually, this was the first time that they brought civilians to Norway, Trondheim, to visit during this cross promotion. And Sam, who is Samantha, she's the producer on our weekly radio show. She was only 23, 22 at the time, I think 22. Was not familiar with Depeche Mode at all. As a matter of fact, she was surprised to find out that a bunch of our bumper music that we have on the show, which is Depeche Mode, was actually Depeche Mode. And she was completely lost as to how big and impactful this band was. And I remember sitting in the military dorm with me, and it was Drew, the guy that I work with, and Sam, and I pulled up on my iPad some of the footage from the Rose Bowl show, just to kind of prove my point that they have a massive following. See, look at the size of this crowd, and look at how they're all in unison waving their hands, and it looks like a bunch of wheat. Have you ever seen anything like this? I don't know if she was impressed or not, but to have the band go and get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? There's no disputing that. Depeche Mode's going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and that's really, really amazing. All right, I want to talk a little bit about Spirits in the Forest. Now, truth be told, I did not get the opportunity to go and see it out in the theaters when it came out, and I'm a little bit ashamed of that. This is, again, one of those circumstances where getting old and having a family and having a job where you have to get up at 2:30 in the morning doesn't really afford you the opportunity to go and on the weeknight, because they were showing the only theaters that I had in the area were showing it like at 7 o'clock on a weeknight, and it was like I really, really wanted to do it, but man, it just, I've got to focus on my full-time job. Thankfully, though, the minute that it was available for download and to purchase digitally, I went and I purchased it and immediately went and watched it. So here's my thoughts on Spirit in the Forest. I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. I thought it was very different. I did like it about that. Going into it with this idea that we're going to meet fans of the band, and that's going to be intercut with live footage, right? Obviously, immediately sort of brings up the 101 documentary, which I love and still watch to this day. It's still such a fun movie to watch, right? This obviously being different, being directed by Anton Corbijn. I thought the venue was interesting that they shot, because it really wasn't your typical... It seemed like a smaller venue than what I'm used to seeing Depeche Mode film when it comes to concert footage. But that being said, I thought the concert footage was spectacular. I can't wait for the physical release, because if I'm not mistaken, we're supposed to get the entirety of the concert when the physical release is available. I enjoyed the interviews with the fans of Depeche Mode, but it didn't really have the same impact that 101 did for me. And I don't really know. I don't really know why that is. It's always interesting to me, and I'd be curious if you've experienced the same thing. And again, this is not disparaging anybody at all. I want to make sure that I'm perfectly clear on this, just from a purely entertainment standpoint. Sometimes it's different to see other individuals and their fandom, and then kind of compare it to how you are as a fan, because we're fans of this band in very different ways, and I feel like the movie was trying to capture the different ways that these fans were moved and impacted by the band, and it did a good job of that. But it just wasn't quite as compelling as I had hoped it was going to be. And I'm just being objectively honest about it. I think I've only watched it once, which is a bit of a surprise. I remember it wrapping up going, okay, I enjoyed that, but I didn't have this rampant desire to go and watch it again. And maybe I need to sit down and watch it again, because perhaps my expectations were too high going into it. I suppose I would have liked to have seen a little bit more concert footage, and maybe the discussions around the fans pared down a little bit more from where they were. I'm really just nitpicking here. I'll go and watch it again and kind of give a further assessment, maybe on a second viewing. My expectation going in, and maybe this is my fault, my expectation going in was that this was going to be another 101 type of documentary and movie. And it just didn't grab me the way that 101 did at the time. And it might just be, a series of circumstances surrounding where I am in life versus where I was back then, back in 1988 when 101 came out. I would be curious to hear your thoughts, and as we get into some listener feedback here, I'll share some thoughts of people who saw the film saw the film as well. I'm really though excited to get the full concert because that concert was so amazing, and I hope that we get that. I hope that we get that full concert at some point in the near future. I feel like with the release of the box set, which I chronicled on the last episode, and it finally being released because it just came out last Friday, right? I feel like Columbia Records and the label are sort of gearing up for more releases in hoping to, and hey man, you got to make a buck, and hoping to capitalize on the attention that the band is going to get, with their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But what did you think of Spirits in the Forest? Did it reach you? Did it have an impact on you? Do you agree with some of my assessment of it? I felt it was a little slow at times. talkshownerd@gmail.com. Leave a comment on YouTube as well. I'd be really curious to share some of those thoughts with you, from you, on next week's show. All right, let's get into some listener feedback. We're going to work in reverse order because I actually have several emails here in front of me from individuals who had emailed me after the last episode, and I never got the opportunity to go and share them with you. So this is a very sort of late addressing of those emails, but I thank everybody who wrote in. Again, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment up on YouTube. So Howard Jr. wrote this. Thanks for the full breakdown on the new box set. I'd say I have mixed opinions on it myself. Now, I'm not a hardcore fan like you are. Depeche Mode does sit in my favorite top 5 artists and groups, along with Information Society. That's interesting, right? They resonated with me a little more because it appealed to my computer geek side. Okay. Depeche Mode wasn't one I got into until Violator. I heard Policy of Truth, Personal Jesus on the radio, and had to buy the cassette. That still remains my overall favorite album of DEM, as I fell in love with the compelling lyrics and the synth music that somehow hit home my senior year of high school. After that, of course, I was hooked. As my listening to Depeche Mode has wavered back and forth over the years, having you add them as part of your My Nerd World podcast has reinvigorated my enjoyment of the music. As for the box set, I've already acquired much of what I like of Depeche Mode already. I have a tendency to not get box sets as I sometimes feel burned. The usual story is you get a box set, and then anything new that comes out doesn't aesthetically fit with it. Yep, I know the feeling. Such as the various box sets of the Star Wars trilogies I have on my shelf or stashed away, and any other serious movie group. Now, don't get me wrong, it looks beautiful. I'm sure it works for some Depeche Mode fans. But if I'm going to pop down $180 to collect something, I will probably be a new Lego Millennium Falcon. Nerd out of the closet moment. Lego and Star Wars were my two most favorite toys growing up, and I blame my wife for my new addiction. Let's see. To close this on Depeche Mode note, the DJ buddy at our wedding made sure we danced to Somebody. And I'll use this moment to say that was actually Somebody, an orchestra version from some local high school band members actually did an instrumental version of Somebody that my wife walked down to the aisle to when we got married. Again, thank you for the podcast. I don't know where you find the time to do them and write a trilogy of books. I don't either, Howard. I've got a wife, teenagers, National Guard training, full-time civilian job, and I just started my master's. I barely have enough time to breathe. I hope that's going well. Fortunately, I can squeeze in your DM and Star Wars podcast to help things move along. As always, may the mode be with you. Very respectfully, Howard Jr. Thank you, Howard. Howard's been been a supporter and a friend for quite a long time. All right, let's go and hear from Gabia. I'm not even going to try to pronounce Gabia's last name. My real last name, by the way, is Logiudice, Logiudice. It means judge or justice in Italian, the judge. And I've been going by Jon Justice ever since I got into the entertainment field because Logiudice was difficult to say on the radio. So Gabia, who phonetically spelled it out, I appreciate it. You know what? I'm going to give a stab at it. I'm going to take a shot. Gabia Vientrencaiate. I probably added an inflection that is not the language that is. All right. Gabia writes this. Your latest podcast has been very enjoyable and timely. Since I'm very excited to see Spirits in the Forest, and given my recent attempts to convert friends into Depechists have turned out to be resounding failures. I know the feeling. One must hope that the Mode box set does the trick. Now, regarding Delta Machine and Ben Hillier's influence, I believe that we should remember that the melodic shortcoming does originally stem from the creative mindsets of the band members. I read an excerpt from the complete South by Southwest 2013 interview with Jason Bentley. I actually knew Jason Bentley. More of acquaintances than anything else. I had a friend of mine that dated him for a while. And it revealed that the root of the stripped-down quality came from Martin's very finished-sounding demos and Dave wanting a looser, more live sound. I think this all resulted in limiting experimentation in the studio, or at least what was chosen to be expressed on record for the sake of cohesion. I like where your head's at on this. I will go out on a limb and state that the combination of coming off of Soul Saver's record and VCMG is okay, but not brilliant, because the album ended up sounding too conventional in several places, and non-conventionality is a key element to Depeche Mode. Had they decided upon a track listing around 10 or 12 songs, I believe more time would have been devoted to developing the stronger songs. Regarding Exciter, I'm looking forward to your review, since this album and its B-sides are very underrated and under-discussed apart from Dirt, I must personally admit, amongst the most hardcore fans. A little note regarding pronunciation. Emphasis is on the first syllable of my name, and the Lithuanian J is pronounced like the German one. It's completely all right. Do not get me started on pronouncing my surname. So, Gabia, thank you so much for the email. I greatly appreciate it. All right, Shelly writes this. Hi, Jon Justice. I just wanted to email to you and let you know that I appreciate your attention to all things Depeche Mode. I found your podcast today, and I'm new to podcasts, and yours was the first one I decided to listen to. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look forward to hearing other episodes. I'm a longtime DM fan, and I have never found someone who loves Depeche Mode as much as me. I have listened to the band for 27 years. The first time I heard them was at age 12, when I saw the music video for Walking in My Shoes. I love hearing the stories of individuals that found the band later in their career. I think that's amazing. And then I just lost my place. After that, I was completely hooked. And for many years to follow, it was practically all I would listen to. I know the feeling. Peppered in with some Red Hot Chili Peppers, Nine Inch Nails, yes, and Stone Temple Pilots. Interesting. It sounds like for you, the Martin Gore lyrics are what speaks to you. For me, I would say it's the sound of the music and Dave Gaughan's voice and the commanding stage presence at live shows that speaks to me. Let me stop here real quick. And actually, I'm going to make a note so I don't have the problem that I just ran into 30 seconds ago when I stopped and I lost my place. And of course, what did I do? I went and I lost my place. It's fascinating to me how Dave has changed his stage style throughout the years. I really hope that maybe I'll do this someday. I really hope that someday somebody will go through and put together a compilation video showing Dave and how his character has changed throughout the years from tour to tour. Right? He's always been one of the best, if not the best, live performers ever to grace a stage. But he's also sort of reinvented himself in and there's certain times when I've liked him more than other times. Probably if I'm going to point to my favorite era of Dave on stage, it's probably Violator. I did enjoy quite a bit Songs of Faith and Devotion and the devotional tour, and the singles tour afterwards. But again, there's a bit of a cloud over that just because from a personal standpoint, looking at these guys like they're my friends, I feel I'm remembering what Dave was going through at the time, right? And that's kind of tough to push past. But it really is amazing to me how his stage presence has changed. Still as energetic as ever, but it has morphed over the years. I've seen them probably live 7 times, with the Devotional Tour being my first concert ever as a middle schooler with my parents. I also had a chance to see Dave gone solo at a very small theater where I could literally reach out and touch his feet. I had a similar circumstance to seeing the band at the Roxy in Los Angeles at a pre-warm-up show for the Exciter Tour, which was one of the most amazing experiences I ever had, seeing the band up. I mean, it was right there. I mean, the stage was like a foot high, and they're just right there. It was incredible. It was quite exciting to be that close to my idol. I have some very fond memories of my life where DM has been a steady presence. Like you, I probably listened to at least one song a day while driving in the car. Easy one song, if not more. With the last song I listened to, and probably my favorite one being Higher Love. I look forward to seeing the documentary. I've secured my tickets. I hope to soon hear a new studio album as well. It is number 1 on my bucket list to one day meet the band. If you have any insights on how to make that dream a reality, I'm all ears. Thanks for sharing this podcast with a fellow DM fan like myself, Shelly. My circumstances beyond the story that I mentioned about me meeting the band just randomly out of the club. I mean, we knew, too, there were rumors going around of where they were going to be, so we were able to find them. I was really blessed to be working in radio at the time, so I was able to get backstage passes for these shows, which gave me the opportunity to meet them. Oh my gosh, I met them twice. So I met them once winning tickets through K-Rock for they did those 2 one-off shows promoting the release of Ultra after Dave's overdose. And they performed in England, and then they performed at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. And I have a picture, actually, behind me, I'm looking at it right now, of me and the band from that show, and seeing them for that small set that they did. And then I met them several years later in San Francisco, Sacramento. I had backstage passes, and my wife and I were able to go back there, and that's where I have a framed Exciter Tour poster signed by Andy, Martin, and Dave. That's up in my living room. So in terms of being able to see the band, I don't know what it's like now and what it takes to go and meet them at this point in time. I wish I could help you more on that. Dave Sandoval writes this. Hi, I'm a hardcore DM fan. I would love a live concert version of World Violation, my first and best concert I've ever been to. Yeah, I think that's one of those things that all of us fans wish that we would get one day, is a live release of World Violation. Brat, who was in charge of the website, I don't know what he does for the band now, but I know that for a while he was putting up clips from the World Violation tour. So the rumor has always been that there is footage that's out there and available, but it just hasn't been released yet. All right, one more, and this is a more recent email. As a matter of fact, I got it this morning. Javier. My name is Javier. I am from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I'm really a fan of DM and also a fan of Star Wars. How's that? Your soulmate from the South. How cool is that? I found your podcast on Spotify last year, and now I'm kind of catching up with my nerd world. I like your review of the albums. Sometime it made me pay more attention to a song I did not like. The only time I was not in agreement with you was with regard to Delta Machine, which I mentioned earlier in the show. From my point of view, it's the best release since after Songs of Faith and Devotion. My top albums are Violator, Some Great Reward. No songs are skipped. My top 3 songs are Halo, It's No Good and Broken. Studio version is the best song of DM. I love Broken too. Oh my gosh, I love that song so much. I'm a fan of DM since I was 15. I'm 45 now. And the very first song that made me a fan was Everything Counts 101. I loved that concert. At that time here was difficult. It was difficult to get albums. Some of them were reboots, like the 1990 People Are People, Black Celebration, Construction Time Again, and the singles. In 1991, I bought my first CD. Of course, it was 101. Boy, I got to tell that story. I'm going to have to write that down. I've got just... there was something about that time period around 101, that post Music for the Masses, when the concert came out, the promotion around that, the black and white imagery of Anton Corbijn, there was just something magical about that time period, and that live release was just something truly, truly special. And so was that 101 movie again. And I probably just landed on the reason why 101, the movie, resonated more with me than Spirits in the Forest did, because now I'm realizing that there was just a lot of special vibes, I guess. There was just something about that period of time in the band's career that really stuck out to me. Let's see. Getting back to the email. They've only come to in Argentina. They only came 3 times. Devotional tour without Fletch, Tour of the Universe, and the Spirit Tour. Of course, I went to see them each time. Well, that's my little story of DM praying for each new album that Alan returns to the band, which I don't believe will happen. I hope you have time to read it. Spread the news around the world, Javier. I did have time to read it, Javier, and I thank you so much for the email. I want to hear from you, and if this turns into, for the most part, sort of listener feedback and me covering the albums until the release of another album, I'm cool with that if you're cool with that. And I want to say thank you for everybody that's written in, everybody that downloads the show. I was going and looking at the stats surrounding the show, and it's funny because I was only planning on doing about a half hour, and I ended up doing an hour. I was going and looking at the stats for the podcast, and I've seen this uptick that I didn't know was happening with the podcast. For some reason, people have been discovering this podcast, and a part of me also felt a little bit guilty, like, oh man, I didn't realize people were going and finding the podcast again. So thank you again. Thank you for checking the show out. Thank you for downloading it. Thank you for reaching out to me. And if you did that on Twitter with my video where I looked like a raggedy-haired doofus, thank you there. Thank you there as well. I feel like we could all get together in a room, never have met each other, and yet all feel like best friends, right? That's what it feels like. All right, so here's my call to action. If you want to support the show, and you want to help encourage me even further to continue to keep up with the show, I don't do Patreon. I've wrestled with the idea of doing Patreon, but I don't do Patreon. I do run some ads on the show, so I'm able to get a little bit back when it comes to, depending on how many downloads I get. But if you really want to support the show, I hope that if you're a reader and you like sci-fi, that you'll take a moment and go and pick up a copy of my book series. It is set in the near future. Taft Guardia is a flight mechanic, and it's based on Earth. This is where the story starts, in the future. And it is an Earth in the future where air and space flight has replaced car culture. I had this idea, for those that are familiar with the Fast and Furious movies, I had this idea of crossing Fast and Furious with Star Wars, with a little bit of Ready Player One when it comes to the pop culture references from my life in it. And that's what really was sort of at the core of the book. It's sort of a combination of that. But it's the future. Air and space flight culture has replaced car culture. Everybody has a vehicle they can fly around in. Taft Guardia is our protagonist. He is a hopeless romantic and a massive Depeche Mode fan. The girl that he longs to be with receives a mysterious message from her scientist father, which thrusts Taft, Katha, that's the girl, into this mystery in the middle of when Earth is suddenly put in jeopardy in the wake of an industrial catastrophe. And it's up to our protagonists and their friends to help save humanity because of this secret that they've uncovered in this mystery as they evacuate the planet and head for the stars. That's the opening book, and it sort of spirals forward from there. Book 1 is Embark. Book 2 is called Treasure in Darkness, and the third book will be out in the opening trilogy of the series here in a couple of months. If you want to support the show, please go to Amazon.com right now and search for Embark and Jon Justice. You can get the ebook, both ebooks, for just $2.99. If you purchase the ebook, you get a big discount on the audiobook. The audiobook is produced and narrated by me. You can also get the paperback as well. And there's a website, mynerdworld.net. You can go there too. Previous podcasts are there. My Star Wars shows are there. Concept art for the covers of my book. Details on the book and me at mynerdworld.net. But if you want to support the show, pick up a copy of the book. And if you're not a reader or a sci-fi fan, but you know somebody who is, Amazon makes it really convenient. There's actually just a tab you can click where you can gift an ebook to a friend. So I hope you'll take a moment and pick up a copy of the books. I know you'll enjoy them. The reviews have been great. And speaking of which, if you do pick up a copy and you like the book, please go and leave a positive review. All right, one more quick programming note. You might notice that there is no Depeche Mode music on the show. This is actually me, by the way. I actually made this music. The reason there's no Depeche Mode music on the show is because every time I put in just a snippet of Depeche Mode music, I get dinged with a copyright notice. So I respect that. The band's got to make a buck. I don't have a huge problem with that, so I understand. But that's why I'm having to use original music that is that is directly inspired by Depeche Mode. For the music in the show. So that's why there's not any Depeche Mode music on a Depeche Mode podcast, because Depeche Mode won't let me do it. Thanks for checking the show out. I will be back again next week, and we'll get your listener feedback. We'll continue moving through the releases from Depeche Mode, and we'll pick up where we left off after Ultra. I hope you have a fantastic week, and again, if you want to email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Have a fantastic week in the world we live in and life in general. All right. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.